All right, so this was done yesterday, and it's a new leak. All right, y'all can believe me or not, and I felt motivated to do this because the leaks I'm reading are hilariously wrong, so I felt inclined to do this and set the record straight. I obviously don't know all the details, especially considering no one person at Blizz knows all the details either, as they are literally still creating this next expansion. However, I'm here to provide as much as I know about the expansion and some details around it. The new expansion will be announced at BlizzCon, and you can all come back this post afterwards so I can say, I told you so. Anyway, here we go. Y'all, and honestly, this expansion does sound interesting, and I'm pumped for this one. I'm just going to list this out in bullet form because I don't know all and everything, but I know some info and want to be efficient. Not, of course, in the use of the English language, but that's another case entirely. A close friend of mine that works at Blizz as a developer. Title, World of Warcraft Sea of Twilight. Apparently is a working title and may be changed. Plot, from what I understand, Iridikron has acted as a vehicle for the Void and has successfully stolen some kind of power. I don't really know, to be honest, from the new world tree in the Dragon Isles. My friend mentioned apparently this is how the current expansion ends, and with that has empowered the Void Lords to a level stronger than ever before. The Void is encroaching on Azeroth, and with this, a world revamp is occurring. All that Blizz is doing here is updating all the graphics in our old world, adding in some additional infrastructure, quest hubs, and faction presence in certain zones, but Azeroth is just getting essentially a facelift. The Void and Old Gods are back to essentially corrupt Azeroth and overtake all the current order. I will say, if this is true about the revamp, so I'm going to treat this entire thing as true. Obviously, take it with a massive pinch of salt, but in order for us to not constantly go back and forth about, is this true, isn't it true, you know, that whole thing, I'm going to accept that everything in this is absolutely true. There's nothing wrong with it, just so that we can actually get through this. The problem that I have immediate with this is not the world revamp that people have been asking for. A world revamp, specifically what people want, is something that keeps the old world alive and that gives us reason to go back to the old world. Whereas if it's only a facelift with a couple of quest hubs being added and a couple of, you know, faction sort of strategic moves around the map, that again just creates an Azeroth or an old Azeroth that is completely unnecessary for any max level player, which is not really what people were asking for. This story starts with this happening and eventually takes us to the other side of Azeroth as the story progresses, also known as the South Seas. Here, there are void-touched lands and islands, and the majority of the expansion takes place here once the first raid is released. My friend said probably like 1 month into the expansion, and that is where we will spend the bulk of the expansion. But still going back and forth to Old World Azeroth for quests and objectives. Okay, that's actually not bad. There are many new factions to meet in these lands and adventures to embark on, but the ultimate goal is to weaken the Void forces that inhabit these lands and take aim at the Void Lords themselves. That is really where the story begins, from what I understand, and I don't know entirely where it goes from there, but my friend said it will eventually lead into Light versus Void type of scenario, with many separate factions playing roles in that process, i.e. the Silverhand, Argent Dawn, etc. Light versus Void, we've called this. This is definitely one of those stories that they can absolutely pull off. There's been so many breadcrumbs throughout the history of the last 6 expansions where such an expansion can absolutely be pulled off. Based on what they're saying here, it sounds like Iridikron kind of wins at the end of this. Like, he actually gets what he wants, which would actually be a major twist in World of Warcraft. He did mention that the Dreadlords play a prominent role in this as well, but I don't know much about it. We didn't discuss as thoroughly. Some big name characters, good and bad, we should expect to see are Queen Azshara, Iridikron, Xal'atath becomes the 5th Old God as part of a ritual prophecy coming to fruition. I don't know if that is actually how it works, considering the Old Gods are literal fragments of the Void Lords. So the only way she can actually become a 5th Old God would be if during the ritual she is infused by a Void Lord's power. That could be something. Huge part of the story, apparently. Magni, Thrall, and the 4 main old gods we know of. Yoxaron, Cthulhu, N'Zoth, and Yisaraj. But in like a shadow form or something my friend mentioned. Captain Nightsquell, Lothraxian, Turalian, Zera, Illyria, Windrunner, Dark Naru characters, and many others. Yeah, so far, this doesn't sound too bad, right? So far, this actually sounds like a decent setup for an expansion. Definitely much better than that other fucking wild picture that was floating around. My uncle, my sister's boyfriend, pretty much. Features. Dragon riding will now be available all over Old World Azeroth. We kind of called this already. New kind of riding, sea gliding. We're getting a new set of aquatic creatures that we can mount and use to navigate around the islands and lands on the other side of Azeroth, only usable there. It will have similar functionality to dragon riding, but takes place on the surface of the seas. Now, this could actually be super fun. This could actually be really fun, and it would be cool if Blizzard spends the next 2 expansions, the next one and the one after that, you know, get sea riding up, because let's be real, one of the worst things in World of Warcraft is actually swimming. It's like sort of one of those completely forgotten things in World of Warcraft, so this could actually be really cool. But then maybe the expansion after that, we get some kind of updated ground mount system in World of Warcraft that actually makes ground mounts pretty interesting as well. That could be cool. New zones. The South Seas, main area with new islands and lands never seen before. Other side of Azeroth. Avaloran. Okay, so the other side of Azeroth is a speculation point that has kind of by Blizzard themselves been said that that's not actually real. So according to the official story, what we see from Azeroth is actually the whole of Azeroth. But then, of course, we have the lore from the Traveler book series that suggests that we've never been to the other side of Azeroth. So sort of conflicting there. You know, Blizzard probably just saying that is the whole Azeroth because they don't want to, they want people to be speculating about stuff, you know? So it could be either or. I would love to go to the other side of Azeroth. I would love to know what the explanation is for why we could never do so before. So that's interesting. Avaloran, new capital city. Avaloran is not a capital city. It is an actual landmass. So this would be the first instance where I actually think this is absolute bullshit, because the boats were trying to get to Avaloran and they continuously got their shit kicked in, and they never actually returned. Unless, of course, the boats were sailing to a city called Avaloran, but they constantly made it sound like it's an actual landmass they were trying to get to, but they could just never get there, and everyone else had escaped to this Avaloran place. I'm not entirely sure why this would be the new capital city, because none of the Titans' forces could make it to Avaloran. How the fuck are we going to get there? Especially if we're on the side of the Titans? I'm not entirely sure. Uldaz, Kazalgar, Talabim, Plunder Isles. My friend said we're going to some kind of Voidlands later in the expansion. Similar concept to what Argus was in Legion. Located in the island of Avaloran? Maybe. New races. My friend was being a dick and wouldn't tell me what they were, but he mentioned the Horde and the Alliance will each be getting one new unique race. He knows I love new races, so he was egging me on, unfortunately. New classes. My friend mentioned there won't be any new classes in this expansion, but apparently several specs are going to be transformed into more support-style specializations with big talent tree changes, and the race class combinations will be really opening up extensively. So this part could literally have just come from the interview that Preach did at Blizzard. This part, however, is completely going against what Blizzard said they're going to do. Blizzard made it very clear that they will not be turning any existing specs into support specs, because they don't want players to wake up one day and realize that their favorite spec is now no longer their favorite spec because it's been turned into a support spec. So Blizzard from the beginning said no support, no current specs will be turned into support. So another point that makes me think absolute bullshit, just FYI. Character power. We didn't discuss this in depth, but my friend mentioned we're getting some kind of gear or borrowed power from our exploration, and please, for the love of fuck, no. No borrowed power. Some kind of gear or borrowed power from our exploration and renown with the different factions. He said Blizz is redesigning how renown will be earned account-wide, so it won't just be through questing, but from all sources of gameplay in a more passive style. I don't really know what he meant. If it is borrowed power, and it's similar to what it was in Legion, where you could literally do anything in the game and it would just offer you the borrowed power, That's at least better than every other fucking expansion of the Legion. But at the same time, why the fuck would Blizzard go back to borrowed power, knowing how much players hated borrowed power? The only kind of borrowed power that I would ever be okay with in World of Warcraft is borrowed power for the open world, right? So for super casual players that just want to become gods in the open world, that could be fine, right? Because it doesn't impact any sort of dungeons. It doesn't impact the raids. It's just for open world content. That could be fine, but anything that goes into a raid suddenly makes it from just being a fun activity that you can do when you're, sort of bored and want to do something, to something that you now must do because you want to raid. And if you want to raid, your borrowed power needs to be maxed out the whole time. I really hope that we don't get that back. Dungeons, my friend said that there is going to be 8 new dungeons at launch, and these will be a mixture of Void-themed, Pirate-themed, Naga-themed. Most will be in the new South Sea area, but I think he said 2 will be in Old Azeroth. He also mentioned they are revamping some old dungeons and will be going back into those with groups together for questing purposes. Okay. The 2 raids at launch threw me off too. Did he say 2 at launch? I thought he said 1 at launch. Oh, wait, here's the raids. My friend mentioned there will be 2 new raids releasing in the first patch of the expansion. 2? That will be the first time fucking ever. He didn't go into too much detail, but mentioned 1 raid is going to be 9 bosses and will be Naga-themed. The other raid is just 2 bosses and will be associated with the Void. I have no problem, if true, with this. Especially if you have, say, the first raid launch a month into the expansion, and then maybe the second raid launches with 11.05. So 11.0.5, this is when the next raid launches with just the 2 bosses in it. It gives players a little bit of stuff to do, and it's actually, it's quite fun, right? It gives you something extra to look forward to with the 0.5 patch. So I don't actually think that would be bad, but it is the first time that Blizzard would ever be doing anything like this. And the one area in World of Warcraft that has not needed sprucing up, if you will, is raids. It's literally the one area where players have pretty much always been fucking happy, right? Players like the raids. They have no problem with them. It's all the rest of us that have an issue with it. Unless the 2-boss raid is a story raid and the 9-boss is regular raiding, we are used to, that would be poggers. That could actually be good if it's a story raid. That could actually be fucking good, Apocalypse. My friend mentioned they're adding 2 new battlegrounds to play. That's how you know this is bullshit. Right there. If there was any doubt, this sort of soothes it. Blizzard adding 2 new battlegrounds in a single expansion? Don't make me laugh. Blizzard barely adds 1 new battleground in an expansion. They're not going to do 2, right? That's just bullshit. To play and continuing to build on and expand world PvP with objectives and activities to take part in aside from just quests. Also mentioned that solo queue rated BGs will be a feature, and they're exploring possibly doing double DPA solo shuffle. This is all I know so far, but it's legit. We were having some drinks and catching up, and I got him to tell me some details about this. It was definitely a fun conversation, and he said Blizz is going all out in this expansion to make it the comeback of the century and get their player base growing again. They're going to be marketing this like crazy and are really striving to bring the old WoW vibes back to continue their attention and get some new or old players into the game. I hope you enjoyed reading. I'm super excited, and I hope you are too. Nothing he mentioned here will bring back the old world vibe of World of Warcraft. As much as he mentioned a bunch of new things that's coming to the game, but if you want to bring back the old world vibe of World of Warcraft, there's a number of things that you will have to do in order to sell that. For one, the world needs to become a lot more difficult to be in. It needs to take a lot longer to actually level, thereby giving some kind of value to leveling. You'd need to find a way to put the RPG back into leveling, as well as the adventure back into leveling. I don't see Blizzard doing that, because there's a lot of players that would lose their minds if that was actually added to the game, because there are, believe it or not, a lot of people that don't like Classic and wouldn't want to play, current WoW, but in a more classic form. Although maybe Blizzard is saying we don't care about those players, because it's clear that Classic is super successful, and this means that it would be better for us to go more the Classic route. And if we do end up losing a lot of our existing player base, hopefully we have the ability to bring a lot more people into the game otherwise, right? There's a poll right now running in chat, boys. What do you think the possibility of this leak is? True or not? So let me know. I personally think... my personal opinion is, if I go off of this is true, there are a few things that I'm excited for here, although not enough about the story has been mentioned. Honestly, I could have written this because these are things that I've speculated on, right? I have said that these things are probably going to happen because the story seems to be pointing to these things happening. So this is not a hard sell in any way, shape, or form. But there's not much else about the story anyway, so there's not much to know at the minute. As for all the other things, that it could be super exciting. The Avaloran thing is something that I've been excited for a long time, right? So I don't know. I'm having my doubts. There's just a few things here that seems very cut and dry. And from all my years covering WoW leaks, this seems to be one of the weakest. But oftentimes, what I found during my WoW leak days was that the weaker a leak seemed, like the almost weirdest a leak seemed, sometimes it was actually the closest. I remember we once covered a leak, this was just before Shadowlands, where the expansion was literally called Shadowlands. The leak said that this is the Shadowlands. It had a screenshot in it, and it had like a map in it, and it was super detailed. Now, 50% of what the guy said was going to happen in the leak did not come true, right? But the other 50% kind of did happen. So the leak was, it made me sort of believe that the guy at least had someone that he knew at Blizzard that gave him some information there, and he just sort of wrote a bunch of other embellishments. And this is something that I can say, it's not wrong. Not all Blizzard developers know everything about the game that they're making because the teams are working on different things. So it is possible that not everyone is going to have all of the details about the newest expansion. And oftentimes what can happen is these guys are leaking and they're actively putting fake shit into the leak to ensure that they not actually expose their friends or their sources in any way, shape, or form. So that can also happen, which is why you sometimes get these leaks that's kind of almost right, but it's also very wrong. I don't know. Doubt, I think, is pretty much all I feel at the minute. Just doubt. But overall, if this is true, it would be an expansion that I would be looking forward to. And yes, dragon riding in the water. Yeah, fuck it. Let's go. Let's see how that works.